Hey guys, what's up? It's Erin here from the Petite Planner, and today I'm going to be showing you a few different 90s tech doodles and how to do them. And this kind of came after my May plan with me was released. A lot of people had interest in some of these doodles, and I thought I would share with you so that you could draw them yourself or recreate any of my spreads or just add them to your journal just for fun. So we'll get started and I will walk you through each step of this. So for this, we're just going to need a pencil, an eraser, and some fine line pens. So we're going to start with the Polaroid camera, and we're going to draw a horizontal rectangle, and then directly below that, we're going to draw a shorter horizontal rectangle that is the same length. And then below that, we're going to create one that is just slightly longer, and then we're going to connect those points there to make diagonal lines, and this makes it look like the camera is a little bit three-dimensional, like that bottom part is closer to us than the back part. And I did shorten the very top rectangle on my Polaroid camera. I just felt that it was too tall, and so I did shorten it. Go ahead and play around with yours. It doesn't have to look just like mine. These are doodles, so it's totally up to how you perceive them and how you want them to appear when you're drawing them. So now I'm just going over and I'm outlining the outline of my camera, and then I'm adding a second line there in that very bottom rectangle, and then adding a rectangle inside of it for the actual slot where the picture comes out of. And then we'll add our main lens here. So I like to do a double ringed circle and then put a little circle in the very middle of it. Which I didn't draw right there. And then I'm adding the top piece of the camera, and you can kind of see the little eyepiece that you would hold your eye to on the camera as well. So now we'll go ahead and add in these last few extra features here. So there is like the flash up in the upper right hand corner, which is going to be a rectangle with an oval inside of it. And I know that these are kind of hard to see. It's really hard to get overhead video and not be able to mess where your hand is, and I even tried to put it at an angle, so I apologize. You can pause the video and then try to copy what I did. And then this last step, I am adding the lines that you see that are on the old Polaroid cameras. It's like the rainbow lines, so they come straight down from the lens and then they kind of angle out the same way the bottom piece of that camera angles. And then the last step here would be to fill in that very center rectangle where the picture comes out with black, to add some contrast, and then obviously if you'd like you can add some color to this as well. Our next doodle is going to be a cassette tape, so we're going to start with a horizontal rectangle, and then we're going to go over this with our pen, but we are going to round out those corners. After you have finished outlining the outside of your cassette tape, we are going to add a rectangle to the center of your cassette tape, and this is where the little circles will go. So they're like the little dials with the teeth in them that actually turn it. And then at the very bottom, we're going to add two diagonal lines, both facing inwards with a line above them. And then add your circles in the center of that rectangle that you drew. And I like to do a double line on mine. You don't have to, you could just do a single line. And then we'll draw a little rectangle in the center, and I like to double line that as well. From here, I'm going to pick up my smaller pen for the finer details. So here I'm adding the teeth inside of those circles, and they are just kind of like these little U shapes, and I don't measure them out perfectly, but an easy way to do it is to draw one at the top, one at the bottom, and then two on each side. It's kind of like a clock, and then put the remaining teeth between those. And now here I am going to draw just the little connection points that kind of hold the two sides of the tape together, and then finish it off with some shapes on the very lower part. So I did circles and rectangles. And then I finally add these stripes on both sides of that rectangle. Some of the old cassette tapes have some lines on them, so if you want to replicate those or add a certain color scheme, these are great for dividing up your colors. So the next drawing is going to be a old school Nokia brick phone. So I'm going to start with a vertical rectangle, and then we're going to round that out. So just those top corners, just give them a little bit of roundness. And then it's going to dip in where the screen meets the bottom part where the buttons are. and then come back out, and I am extending mine a bit longer. Sometimes when I'm doodling, I realize that my initial shape wasn't as long or as tall as I needed it to be, so I just extend past that. So now I'm going to go ahead and outline the outline of that Nokia brick phone. We don't outline the pencil that we drew initially for the rectangle. That was just kind of our guideline. And then I am also adding on the antenna, which is just a vertical rectangle and then a little horizontal rectangle on top. And then the screen is this oval shape, and I kind of point the bottom of it because the talk and hang up buttons are right next to that. And then we will add all of our buttons. So I'm just doing circles in rows of 3, and I do 3 rows of circles and then 1 circle in the bottom middle, and then these little like triangles on each side, and then I add little lines for the speakers. From here, just erase your pencil lines, and then if you want, you can go in with a super fine point pen and add in the numbers on each of the keys on the phone. If you're making this a very small doodle, this is probably one option that you would forgo, and maybe instead you might add something to the screen or just use colors. Our next doodle is going to be an old Nintendo controller. So we're going to start with this long horizontal rectangle, and then we're going to find the midline of this to put the little top piece where the cord comes out of the controller. So I just make these diagonal lines and almost like another little rectangle on top. And then we're going to double outline our controller. I'm doing this in pencil just because I was kind of struggling to get nice straight lines, and so I thought doing it in pencil first would ensure that I would get my lines equal and parallel to one another. So now I'm just going over all of my lines that I've made in pencil, other than that midline we made, as that was just a guideline. Next, we're going to divide our controller into 3 sections, with the middle point, the middle section being the longest. So we'll create these smaller sections on each side and try to make them equal. And then we'll add some lines to the center. So I start by creating the line closest to the bottom, and it's a little bit wider because the select and start button will be there, and then adding 2 extra lines above that, and then doing 2 rectangles for the start and select button. And on the left we'll do our D-pad. So to create a nice cross, I like to create a vertical rectangle and then a horizontal rectangle directly through that, and that gives you a pretty good cross. And then the last thing is to add the 2 circular buttons on the right hand side of the controller. Now we'll move on to draw our boombox. So we're going to start with a horizontal rectangle again. And then for the handle, we're going to create another rectangle on top of that that is centered on the top of this. And then we will take and make those lines diagonal so that it's not just this boxy handle and it actually has some shape to it. Next, we will outline the outline of our boombox. And you're going to go all the way around your rectangle and then also outline that handle that we made. And then I'm going to double outline my handle to give it a little bit of width. And I'm also going to double outline my boombox. This is just more of a doodle effect that I really like. And again, it's not necessary, and it's totally up to you in your preference of what your doodles look like. So now the next thing to do is to add some ovals to each side for the speakers. And these are another thing that you could double outline, especially when you're doing colors. Then it gives it a nice contrast. And then we'll draw a rectangle in the middle for where the cassette would go in. And now I'm going to pick up my smaller pen for the finer details. So now I'm going to add some little boxes right above that cassette player for the buttons. And then we'll do these hash lines on both of the speakers to give them that speaker effect and look. Our final doodle is going to be a Game Boy. So this is also a vertical rectangle, but it's not going to be the exact same shape as the Nokia Phone. It's a little bit wider and then not quite as tall. And then we're going to round out the corners. So we're tracing over that rectangle, but we are rounding out the corners, and you do that by rounding out the inside of the rectangle, not going around the outside of it. And then we'll add our screen, which is kind of this rounded rectangle that sits in the upper half of our Game Boy. This is another one that I do like to add that double line to. The old Game Boys did have a pretty thick border around the screen, and then we'll also add a D-pad on this. You can do it the same way we did with the controller, or you can freehand it. And then the two circular buttons are at a bit of a diagonal, and then you add two rectangles on the bottom for the start and select buttons. And then you can feel free to add any extra details or colors that you want. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.